Welcome to the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, where we discuss an independent approach to the art of cinema and explore the subtext of various featured films. My name is Peter O'Brien, and I am an independent filmmaker, author, and musician.
My name is Bendler. I'm a film and stage actor and a pop culture enthusiast.
I'm Anne Milleville, a French screenwriter and producer.
Today's VHS selection is Fantasia from 1940. And that's one thing that I really actually enjoy about what we're doing here is we'll take an animated movie from the 40s and we'll take a classic movie from the 50s and we'll take sci-fi movies from the 70s and a crime thriller from the 80s, and we just kind of mix it all together because in the end of the day, it's all entertainment and it's all fun and it's all pretty good stuff in its own right, you know? So today we're talking about Fantasia, and if you have not seen Fantasia, go check out the VHS video on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel, subscribe so you don't miss anything else, and then come on back to us. But I feel like Fantasia sort of gets a little bit of a pass because it's not exactly a spoiler-filled story so much as it is a theatrical, cinematic, musical presentation. So if you listen to the radio, there's a pretty good chance you may have heard some of what we're going to be talking about on the classical stations. And if you were a kid born after 1940, then there's a pretty good chance you've seen some of Fantasia at some point. This one, I was aware of it as a kid. I didn't really care for it too much because there was no story. I liked the music and I liked the animation, but I just wanted to be a little bit more engaged. And I was coming, from cartoons, with like craziness like Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner and even Mickey and Goofy. And Mickey's here, but he's not the whole show. So for me as a kid, it didn't necessarily grab me. But as I got older, like I said in the video, and I developed a greater appreciation for music and animation as an art form, this one really kind of just stands out among the crowd and it really shines.
I discovered Fantasia when I was 20 years old, something like that. I didn't have the chance to watch many Disney movies when I was a kid, so I liked it from the very first time, and rewatching it, it's something that you don't see in other animation movies. And when you think about it, it was in the 40s, as you said, so it's kind of a technical feat for this time. And even now, when you think about it, we don't have those kind of animation anymore. It's made on computers mostly.
This movie, like all the other Disney cartoons, it's always been in my life. I don't remember the first time that I saw it, but I remember, like you, Pete, as a kid, it did not hold my attention at all. And I would try hard. Like, it was like one of those things where it's like, people are like, oh, Fantasia is so great. I'm like, I'm going to try it again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't get into it. I still kind of feel that way now as an adult, and I saw it again. I mean, I have appreciation for different things about it, but as a whole, yeah, it's one of those that I feel my whole life I've been told I should like it, and I try to like it. I'm not saying I dislike it, but I don't love it the way some people do. It's a weird and interesting thing because it's a tremendously made movie, but it just doesn't hold me attention-wise.
The interesting thing about it is the presentation of it. It's an anthology, so it's a lot of little stories all just kind of put together in one package. So it is one package, so you feel obligated to sit down and watch it. But sometimes, you think of it like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe I'll just watch like one segment today. If you take it in doses, sometimes it can be a little bit more digestible. But the other interesting thing about this film is it's been around for so long. And when we were kids, they used to put films in the vault.
Yep.
You guys remember the vault?
Yeah.
Disney would always say, oh, it's only available for like 3 months and then it goes back in the vault. So they were trying to like sell as many tapes as possible in a short period of time as possible. And so things weren't always available. It's not like, oh, Disney Plus, like the entire back catalog, save, Song of the South is on there. And, you can watch it right now. Like as I'm talking, I can go on my phone and open up Disney Plus and watch Fantasia. Whereas when we were kids, if you didn't have a copy and the video store didn't have a copy, you weren't watching Fantasia.
That was it.
Unless the Disney Channel decided to run it and you were fortunate enough to have cable.
They were ahead of the curve in that because now, I mean, as I am a toy and movie collector, the limited edition is still a hot angle to sell stuff. Disney was ahead of their time with that crap because they had that vault thing going on. Yeah, it was kind of like emotional blackmail. It made you buy all these stories that you had become attached to and you wanted to share with other people in your life. And as you got older and had children, I did it right before Disney Plus was a thing. I went on a spree buying all these old, Cinderella and all these Snow Whites for my daughters and for my son.
Yeah, in France, we didn't feel that rush about having the Disney movies. I don't know why, because Disney is big in France, of course, but I don't know why we were not so much on it. We had something else to watch animation and cartoons called Club Dorothée. Every French people my age will know what it is. And it was mostly Japanese cartoons. Yeah, so that's weird. I have no explanation on that. Why in Europe we watch more Japanese than Americans? I have no explanation, but that's the thing. So we didn't feel like we have to get the VHS. We have to watch it.
So you weren't threatened with the vault as a child.
No, not
In
at
other
all.
words, like we were threatened with the vault. Like it's like a punishment.
Like I said, as I grew older, my fondness for this film like developed, and came a point where it's like I was just driving around listening to the soundtrack, and then it's like, you know what? I want to revisit Fantasia. I had to go to the library to get it because it was in the vault, but then Disney Plus comes along, and now it's something that I feel like I can just throw on in the background, and I don't care if my kids watch it because it's classical music that's awesome, and it's very, very, very exceptional animation, which is awesome, and it in that alone it gets their minds thinking about things creatively, and or it makes them question things or brings questions like what's going on in there and whatnot, so it sparks conversation. So for me, Fantasia, especially as a parent, is like kind of almost like a go-to.
Yeah, maybe you need to be sensible to classical music to like it. I don't know. For me, it's more an educational movie. Even if you don't really know classical music, it's a good way to introduce it to your kids. But I can understand nowadays maybe kids want something more thriving. For me, it's a good way to introduce those kind of music to kids.
I agree with that too. And like, so like my kids, like I introduced it to them like super early before they knew what was what. Like they were watching Fantasia, like, within their first year on this planet, it was in the background.
Hands down, Disney has always had top-notch animation. Even the earliest stages when it was at its crudest form, still was fantastic stuff. And this is before we had Don Bluth. This is before we had Pixar or DreamWorks or any of the other companies that are existing currently. Disney always had tremendous animation. It's on display here with Fantasia, and the way the musicality of the whole thing, the way the characters move with the symphony and the whole 9 yards. It's unbelievable that someone sat there with a pencil and drew out every one of those motions to make that whole thing a fluid thing. That's mind-boggling in itself, which again is that paradox of like, it's incredibly artistic. It's kind of mind-blowing that someone or a group of people could actually do all this to have this be the outcome, have this be the product. But yet I don't revisit it. It's just such a weird thing, but I can appreciate it, from an artistic standpoint, till the cows come home. It's really incredible when you think about the flowers or the movements in the water or whatever it is, really right on the beat of the music. It's super impressive.
Usually the music is written for the action on the screen, and here they took the reverse approach. And so in that regard, you would think like it might be a little bit easier. It's like, okay, this is our script, this is our map, we got to have actions happening here, and they time it out with the number of frames and the number of seconds, and they just sync it up. But I think the most interesting thing that I found in watching this film is that there are no credits.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody at Disney was working on this movie, and you only know about Walt Disney, Mickey Mouse, Deems Taylor, the MC, and the conductor, Leopold Stokowski. Other than that, like everybody else's work was, kind of just, it certainly wasn't down the drain, but nobody is getting a spotlight because they wanted to keep it focused on the music.
Yeah. And I don't want to shortchange the artistic endeavor that is Fantasia, but I feel like at 2 hours and change, like we got the point.
For me, watching Fantasia, I could have 5 hours. I don't like all the sequences, I don't like all the segments, but each segment is an adventure. This movie, that's what I said, it's a cinematographic experience. You don't have a story all along, it's multiple segments, and so it could never stop, actually.
I'm glad that it did.
Steve is having Clockwork Orange Alex flashes in his mind right now with the clamps in his eyes and the
Right.
straitjacket, just
I
watching Fantasia endlessly.
I just meant that, like, not to cheapen the experience, but the novelty of having the classical music matched with this animation that goes perfectly with it. That's what I meant. Like, I get what you're doing there. Not saying that each thing isn't unique unto itself, but like the overall art form. And I think that's why in that sequel they went shorter, right?
That's the key right there, is in the 1940s, this was an event.
Right.
This was what was happening. This was your evening. You were going to the theater and that was it. So like if the movie started at 7 and then you had a little intermission and then, you were done at 9:30 and then, you're home by 10. So like this was your evening. It was like going to a play or an opera or the symphony or a ballet. It was like this was the new kind of theater going event that audiences could take part in, instead of just going to the movies. Because going to the movies back then, it wasn't like today with assigned seating and regular showtimes. They had, the newsreel, they had a cartoon, they had a short film, they had an A picture, they had a B picture, and you went and you paid your nickel and you sat in the theater until you wanted to leave. And that's how it worked. Like they would just run stuff all day and you could come and go. And with it being more regulated, like that's partially what Fantasia was kind of like a great grandfather in doing, is like this movie is going to start and it's going to play straight through and you have to buy your seat like you're going to a theater event. So audiences today, like if Fantasia were to come out today, audiences would like not know what to do with themselves. And that's partially why Fantasia 2000 was like kind of a nice throwback, but it was a little bit more reeled in.
And that's the thought that I had, watching it this time around, because I don't know how many times I've seen this. I've seen it a bunch, but I thought, man, this would probably be a lot cooler if I was in a movie theater or if it felt like an event. To sit at home and drink that in, not my cup of tea per se. But I think if I was out and that was the thing I was doing, probably be more digestible.
Yeah, I agree. I think originally it was a huge thing, also because you had the sound effect and everything. But watching it at home, for me, it's like watching the R&B music TV channel. I guess you have that also in America, right? You have specific channel for specific type of music. So that's the same. It just instead it's classical music, and you have Mickey Mouse dancing. But that's the same.
I'm not going to say that there's not a touch of nostalgia. I think about, me being a kid and like watching it with my mom and my grandma, who's no longer with us, and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. That's one of the classic ones, that, when you think of that movie, at least for me, I think of Mickey in the Hat with the broom, and carrying the pails. But I also like, I like the one you like also, Pete, the finale there with the devil. That one's super cool, man. It's like, it gives me that like Black Cauldron kind of a feel before the Black Cauldron, those, spirits and everything flying at the screen. That's pretty cool. So I dig that one. And I dig like the peacefulness, the Ave Maria at the end. So like I said, this is a very paradoxical movie for me.
Yeah, I'm getting that.
Talking about the devil, I was surprised that you have quite dark segment, because yeah, it's Disney, so you expect that it's for kids. Maybe it wasn't in the 40s. Maybe it was for everybody. When you think about it, the dinosaurs and yeah, the one with the devil at the end, it's quite dark for kids. I I think maybe nowadays kids are used to see violent scenes, but at that time in the 40s, yeah, I was surprised to see those kind of scenes.
Yes, there is Mickey, but there's also this other stuff. So, like audiences, it was trying to like broaden the scope and the appeal of animation. Like Walt Disney was really kind of ahead of his time in trying to reach as many people as possible. And that was one of the goals he had with Snow White just 2 years earlier. Like he wanted to kind of evoke an emotional response from an audience with like purely animated characters. And so that's why like Snow White essentially dies at the end, and like people were crying in the theater. And he was like, yes, I won. I'm going to bathe in these tears. He got his emotional response that he wanted from the audience. And so he just wanted to kick it up a notch with Pinocchio and then like blow their brains out with Fantasia insofar as like what the animation could do and what the animation could achieve, you know. You couldn't see volcanoes erupting readily and in color unless you were there in 1940, you know, but through animation, he could present these ideas and these abstract ideas in a plausible, tangible, and sort of realistic way. And it really is kind of the foundation for modern special effects when you think about it.
I don't know if it's true, but I heard that for the dancing animals, you know, the hippos, the ostrich, I think you say. So for this segment, I heard that the artist had to take dancing classes just to be sure of the movement and everything. So when you think about it, it's such a technical feat, first of all, to do what we said, that the animation is coordinated to the music and everything. And they think about the small details with Disney, maybe the others also, but I think it's really specific to Disney to have those kind of details in their movies, just to stick to the reality while we're talking about hippos, you know, dancing with a tutu. So, but they wanted to look it right.
Well, Disney had a history of doing that, bringing in live action animals or models. He always liked to bring in the live animal if he could, and have the animators just sit there and sketch away.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the animals in Snow White and then you look at the animals in Bambi, the progress in the animation and the presentation of the animation in that short window of time, like less than 5 years, it's like night and day almost. And that's kind of what I think Fantasia was the springboard for, to get from that one level to the other. And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Visually Hidden Selects. If you're looking for a spoiler-free recommendation of a classic film with professional analysis and insight, check out Visually Hidden Selects, exclusively on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel.
I love the hippos. Of course, I love the one with Mickey also, the sorcerer, the most known segment. But actually, I love quite all of them. And weirdly, the one that I really kept in my mind was at the break, you know, the intermission. It's a very small segment. It's the personification of music, really. To see the sound like that and to make it in a picture, it's amazing for me.
Yeah, I agree. I really love the segment with the featuring the soundtrack, where they actually bring out the soundtrack and they show
Mhm.
you how the sound wave appears and
The vibrations,
responds.
yeah.
And I thought that was very, very clever. And that was a very good feature of this film and a very good use of it. I also really like in the first segment, the toccata and fugue in D minor, when they kind of segue slowly into the idea of Fantasia. So they start out with the silhouettes and then they move into the bows in the sky. And then it just kind of like wraps up into this kind of like surreal, abstract presentation that the music is then carrying, but they keep that theme of music throughout the visuals with the notes. I do also, I think I like all the segments as well, some more than others, of course. You know, like I said in the video, my favorite is Night on Bald Mountain, just because of like, it's kind of like that's the grand finale. They pull out all the stops, and for me personally, I just, you know, being a fan of horror and just ghost story type things, you know, I just feel like the imagery is also just a lot of fun and lends itself very nicely to the animation, because they do have all those kind of spooks and specters flying around, and it's over this small village. So for me, that's really as good as it's going to get, and it is really one of the best notes to end it on.
I liked a lot of them, but I like 4 of them the most. The soundtrack one, definitely seeing the vibrations is always cool. Mickey's, I mean, that's a classic piece of business there. I always loved with my, you know, and this goes again to the nostalgia of it, but my sister and I would crack up with the alligators trying to hold the hippos up and all that stuff. So that was always a fun one for us. And then the end one, you know, the finale there is fantastic, even though the little mushrooms always make me laugh. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there.
I was surprised also they talk about the theory of evolution in the segment with the dinosaurs, because, you know, maybe especially at that time, it's something that not everybody believes in. And as Disney is targeting kids, I mean, I don't know if at that time they were targeting kids, but you can have some parents saying that I don't want my kids to have this vision of evolution. Even if I do believe in the theory of evolution, you always have people, especially at that time, I guess, the early 20th century. I think many people were not believing in it.
The historical context of it is also something that comes into play because we've lived with the idea of dinosaurs and the museum displays of dinosaur bones for our entire lives. But it wasn't new, but it was newish. It wasn't that old. Like by the time we saw and experienced Fantasia in the 80s, it was already like maybe 100 or so years of like dinosaurs being discovered and on display. And at the time, it was kind of new. So it was this sort of new concept. It was like closer to that discovery and that point in history and science than we are today. And as a visionary, I think he was just very fascinated with visual exploration of ideas through animation. There are some segments that it's not that I don't love them, but I don't necessarily need to see them every time I watch it. Specifically, the dinosaurs are cool, but it's long. It's
Mhm.
the longest segment. I believe it's like half an hour, and you're coming off of Sorcerer's Apprentice, which is like a really tight, like 12 minutes. And then you jump into, this history of
Yeah.
prehistory, but it's awesome. You watch that at double speed and it's really cool. It really
Yeah.
cooks,
Well, I was gonna say you could
but
probably shave a half an hour off that movie and you'd be okay.
yeah, well, and the Pastoral Symphony, honestly, with the centaurs and the gods, that's one that, and I love Beethoven. I mean, the music is beautiful, but I feel like there maybe could have been a better visual accompaniment in my mind's eye for that particular piece of music. There are cool ideas explored in it, but I feel like the mythological beings, they just don't do it for me, at least in that form and presentation. If it was like more like Dungeons and Dragons, maybe that could be boss, or Lord of the Rings, that I could be behind that. But the centaurs, if that was exercised from the film, I feel like it would only make it stronger. If there's a weak link, I'm going to call it for me.
I won't argue that.
I hear what you say, but I like this segment actually. So I don't know, but I do love mythology. So maybe I'm not really objective. So yeah,
Yeah, and I love it too, but for me that segment, I don't know, there's something about it where it's like, okay, let's just get
It's
to Night on
I
Bald
think it's a more
Mountain. Like I think I'm just anticipating Night on Bald Mountain at that point, and I have such a spot in my heart for that piece of animation and that piece of music that like I just want to like get through that, get through the ostriches and the hippos and get to Chernobog's, front
well, I
door.
think it's also a momentum thing. That kind of like it kind of stops the movie a little bit. It gets a little okay, here we go.
Yeah, but as a theater going experience and as like a program, I think it totally works and it is balanced. It's a good solid like 2 hours. But for me, if like I want to like just like have some fun and check out Fantasia and like some good music and some good animation, I want to sit and like watch it and enjoy everything. I feel like I could live without the centaurs. But
I mean,
if I got to pick one to go, that's the
there
one
you
to
go.
go.
I mean,
But that's just
or I
me.
mean, it might be a totally different experience if you're stoned out of your mind watching this thing for 2 hours. You're like, that'll fucking open some doors for you mentally. But yeah, like I don't know. For me, this is like I said, it's like I have a paradoxical relationship with this. I'm not gonna go make a thing of popcorn and sit down and be like, yeah, let's watch Fantasia. It's not happening. But you know, will I show it to my kids again? Yeah, probably. Because I sat through it a bunch of times, and it's your birthright. Now you got to sit through it a bunch of times, and make your mind up for yourself.
yeah, for me, the dinosaurs definitely is not the one I like. It's not because of the theory of evolution. It's first of all, dinosaurs is not my cup of tea, as you say, and yeah, I think it's terrible at the end. The end of the dinosaurs. I don't know, when you see them killing each other, it's like, okay, let's move to another segment.
Yeah, see, and like I like dinosaurs, so for me, like that segment, like even if it is the longest, it's like, oh well, no, but it has dinosaurs in it, so like I'm on board.
The dinosaurs is long. It's cool. It's cool, but it's long. It's just like I think to be like we're talking fair, right? Let's be fair. I think we could shave a half hour off this bad boy, and we're not worse off for the experience. It's a little long. I can't, like when I'm looking at my watch, like this fucking thing's still going on, But it's like let's get to the finish line here.
Well, I think that's probably why they placed the intermission after the dinosaurs. It's like, okay, all right, everybody, go get some fresh air and
Come back.
come on back. Like I think they knew what they were doing when they created that program, and then they ease us in with the little jazz, interlude, and then they bring in the soundtrack to kind of like reintroduce us to the concept of like music and images working together, and then they go right back in.
I fast forwarded right to the soundtrack, and the soundtrack came back in. I was like, we gotta pick this up, like seeing people, get out of their chairs and clear their throat and put their instruments down. I'm like, I got it. Let's just move it along. Let's get to I did that. I played in an orchestra. I know what that's like. But get me to the end. Let's see the vibrations of the music.
But actually, what I like the less, I would say, it's the Deems Taylor's introduction every time. I think it's really interesting at the beginning, but to have him talking every time to introduce, and he says what's going to happen. So you don't have the surprise to discover the story. It tells you everything before it starts. So I was like, okay, let me enjoy the
Spoilers.
moment.
She's like, shut up. Let me see it for myself. I'll tell you what I think. Right.
Exactly.
I get it.
Yeah.
That's like when I watched the Godfather for the first time, right? I rented a version of it that had an introduction by Francis Ford Coppola, and then he fucking ruins things in the movie. I was like, you got to be kidding! I wanted to just throw the TV.
Oh.
Yeah, you just like when this person dies, I'm like what? Furious! I was furious.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. I did like the idea of having a master of ceremonies who would introduce it, but I do feel like, and again, it's part of that sign of the times, presentation of its day. Like at the time, like, oh yeah, that's cool and that's a novel idea. And if you have small children in theater who may not understand all these abstract things, it's like talking to them and explaining it. Like, yeah, I get that. But I agree, like those segments, they're neat, but they're not necessary, or they could be truncated a bit to reduce the spoiler effect of it. If he just gave us like, here's the piece and here's the composer, and we went in like this, sort of like be a little bit more abstract in his presentation,
Not as spoon fed.
not as
Yeah,
deliberate.
okay, that's a fair assessment. I'll take that. Hey, whatever shaves down that running time. You know what I mean?
And fun fact, which is not fun but fact, the movie came out in Europe after the Second World War. So I think it was in 1946, and we didn't see Deems Taylor in this version. We just had a narrator in French, and we were just seeing the orchestra actually. I don't know why they did that, because now the version we can see on Disney Plus France, it's with Deems Taylor. But at that time when it came out, we didn't see the MC. It was just a voice explaining what's going to happen. But French people, when we get pissed off, sometimes
Yeah.
we want to cut head off. So maybe that's why they thought that we would be pissed off with Deems Taylor. So I don't know.
Yeah, just a disembodied voice.
It's better for his sake.
Yeah, Fantasia 2000 really is pretty cool, and it is shorter. It's about 96 minutes, and like I said, this is kind of the legacy of the original film. But in the year 2000, they did make the sequel, or 1999, they made Fantasia 2000 because it was the turn of the century. It was going to be the 60th anniversary of the original. And so just kind of like a little throwback. And they released it in IMAX. So it was a gigantic, like huge event, kind of like the original. You could only go see it in the IMAX theater. And yeah, it has some really, really fantastic animated segments. It's kind of like the pinnacle of the art form, you know, that culminated in the 90s. I always kind of consider like The Lion King as like the last really great Disney animated film. You know, after that, like Hercules and
It just it,
Hunchback of Notre
just
Dame,
goes down.
they just
It
didn't
just goes
do it.
down every time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and but Fantasia 2000, I feel, you know, took the ideas and the history of like the short segments, the silly symphonies, and the idea of the music linked with the animation, and it just kind of brought it all together for like one final hurrah. And that's kind of like, this is like the encore to the Disney animation, you know, legacy as far as I'm concerned.
Fair.
Traditional animation, I'll say.
Yeah, I watched it because I was curious to see what they did after the original Fantasia. And I was a bit skeptical at the beginning because for me it was, oh, again, a remake like the Americans like to do. But actually, I was really surprised in a good way.
Yeah, I was that way
Yeah,
too.
okay. But I was surprised a good way. Because actually, yeah, it's the same energy, but in a more more recent way to see things. I'm not sure I'm really clear, but first of all, the guests. You have many guests coming in the show. So me personally, I just knew two of them because I'm not American, but I'm sure Steve, you will know all of them.
I feel like Fantasia 2000 is a lot more efficient in what it's trying
Right.
to
Yeah, the
do.
segments are shorter,
Okay,
so
fair
if you
enough.
don't like one, you can move to another one. There is one I really didn't like. For me, it's the equivalent of Jaws 3, the one with the dancing whales. Oh my God, this one is really terrible. But the rest is really great. And yeah, you want to say something, Pete? Okay.
No, no, no. I like the dancing whales,
Oh my
but
God,
that's
sorry.
me. I remember watching that and thinking like, wow, those whales are dancing.
Yeah, I remember hearing about Fantasia 2000. I remember my thoughts were, no thanks.
You have a very cool segment with Donald Duck. Really, you should watch just for this segment. It's really cool, and I almost cried watching it. It's really it's fun because it's Donald Duck, but it's a very emotional story. You should watch it.
I'll
Definitely.
check it out.
Yeah, yeah, and they do it to pomp and circumstance, the like kind of graduation
Yeah, I think
music.
Macho Man Randy Savage, but sure, we could go that route. I hear that even at graduation. I'm like, it's the Macho Man. Yeah. Sorry, that's how I was raised.
I don't know if we said it, but definitely Fantasia was an inspiration for the following. Maybe we said it already. For the following Disney movies, when you watch it, you can find like, for example, the brooms in the Sorcerer. You remember? I think it was in the Sleeping Beauty. You have the same kind of movement with the brooms. And yeah, the fairy with the color halo, you can find it in other Disney movies. So you really understand that this is an experience, and they could use it then for the following movies.
Yeah, there are a lot of ideas explored in this film, and that as a result there's a lot of animation that was created for this film. And so it's not uncommon to see Disney recycle some sort of animation sequences or segments or movements. A very famous example is Snow White dancing with Dopey, and they reuse that kind of same movement of animation in Robin Hood when Marion is dancing at the party in the forest. They do that a number of times, and even Winnie the Pooh, Christopher Robin, and Mowgli in the Jungle Book. They will often reuse animation, not literally, but they'll go study those segments and then just kind of repurpose them with the new character settings. And so in Fantasia, yeah, if you watch that, you're going to see all kinds of echoes throughout the Disney animated history. Well, on that note, that's going to about do it for us here today at the Visually Hidden Selects podcast. We'll be discussing a brand new film next time, so be sure to head over to the Visually Hidden YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss that recommendation and the follow-up conversation. You can catch Steven Bendler over at Steve's Pop Culture Corner on Instagram. Anne and I, of course, are also on Instagram as well as Letterboxd, so you can follow us over there and find out what we watch and see what we think. And until next time, stay tuned. See what I did there?
Down in Toontown.